What's the best EQ to use on kick drum on a Wednesday at 4:00? Kind of questions.
How do you personally feel about the whole self-recording thing?
I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I have experience and I have enough wisdom to know that I'm not the smartest guy in the room.
How do you keep things fresh after such a long time, like after 30 years? How do you survive in this, industry for 30 years?
If you're mixing drums like this, you're doing it wrong. It's like, no, I'm not. This is subjective. I'm doing it the way I do it, so shut the hell up.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go.
We have a very special episode for you today. Our guest on this podcast today is Matt Boudreau. Matt is an audio engineer, mixer, and producer based in the San Francisco Bay Area. His credit list includes bands and artists such as Green Day, Alanis Morissette, Deaf Heaven, or Death Cab for Cutie. He's also the host of a fantastic podcast called Working Class Audio. I've been a guest on this show just a couple of weeks ago, and it has been like a dream come true for me, to be honest. So that was really excited. And so I'm very excited to have Matt on our show now. I've learned an incredible amount from Matt and his guests over the years. And I highly recommend you check out the podcast, Working Class Audio, if you don't already know it. We have a lot of things prepared for today that we'd love to talk about. And we're super excited that we get to pick Matt's brain for a bit here and can't wait to dive in. So, hi, my name is Benedict. I'm the host of this show. If you're already a listener, welcome back. If you're new, glad to have you. If you are recording yourself in your jam space, your home studio, this is the right place. We help you with that. We help you get more exciting sounding results from your jam spaces and home studios. And as always, I'm not doing this by myself here. I am joined by my friend and co-host from Madrid, Spain, music producer Manel Espinosa Berenguer. Hello, Manel. Good to have you as well, as always.
Hi, Benny. So happy, as always. And I'm feeling kind of philosophical today.
Philosophical.
Let's get into the interview.
Okay. Yeah. All right, cool. So without further ado, here's Matt Boudreau for you. Hello, Matt. Welcome to the podcast. So glad to have you.
Hey, guys. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for taking the time to do this. So I'm not sure if I want to hear about the philosophical thing, Manel. We'll probably get to that. But first, I do want to hear about it. Well, I'm sure we get to that. First, I want to ask you, Matt, what is top of mind for you right now at your studio, stuff you're working on, things you're currently doing as a producer, engineer?
Oh, what's top of mind? Getting all the mixes done that I have on my plate for everybody and keeping everybody happy and keeping projects flowing and getting them completed. And then I'm excited to see what's on the horizon for the summer in terms of what new projects are going to come my way. Always exciting to get get a phone call, get a text or some form of communication to say, hey, we have a project.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So you're primarily mixing these days, or is it also a lot of production and recording work?
I think I mix the most, and then I master other mixers' stuff, and then third in line I track stuff. But I mostly mix. That takes up most of my time.
All right, cool. So I want to talk about that whole, what you do and who you are a little bit, because I don't remember which episode it was, but there was something that really resonated with me, something you said on an episode of yours on the Working Class Audio. And it might have been in one of your rants in the beginning. I'm not sure anymore, but you said that you see yourself as an engineer or like an audio engineer that also happens to have a podcast. But of course, a lot of people know you because of your podcast. It's pretty popular. A lot of people know that. And that resonated with me because honestly, that has been a problem for me in the past, where it almost led to kind of an identity crisis to a degree, where I was like, I don't want to be known as a podcaster or a content creator. I'm a mixing engineer. That's what I do. And I had this moment where there's a label here in Germany that I really like, and I like a lot of the bands on that label. And a couple of years back, I got a message from that label, or from the owner of that label. I saw it in my email inbox, and I was super excited. And I thought, "Oh, this is the day they're going to hire me to do something for them or whatever." And then I opened the email, and it said, "Hey, we really like your podcast, and we would love to have some of our bands on your show." And and I remember, instead of being excited about that, I was feeling like, "Oh, I wish that you contacted me, because I'm a mix engineer and they want me to work on stuff." So anyway, you said that on one of your shows too, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and whether you're just embracing the fact that you are a podcaster also and are known as that, or if you'd still prefer to just be known as a mix engineer or audio engineer in general.
Yeah, boy, identity crises. Yeah, I've had a few of them over the years. And when we talk about having an identity crisis, some people might laugh at it, but it's actually a moment of when you're trying to figure out, who am I? Where am I going? What am I doing with my life? And I had that moment, or I had my first identity crisis when I left my first band to join another band. And then I had another identity crisis when I produced my first record. And I realized then and there that I really didn't want to be a drummer anymore. And that was a bit of a struggle. So when it comes to this, when it comes to working class audio and being a podcaster, but also enjoying being an engineer more, I guess the two overlap so much that I don't get too worried about it. Although sometimes people will go, "Oh yeah, somebody took a picture of me and my friend Lidge from Recording Studio Rockstars and titled it The Podcasters," and I was like, "Yeah, I really don't want to be just the podcaster." But you accept it for what it is. The fact of the matter is that working class audio has opened so many doors for me and has introduced me to so many more people as a result. So I think what I've tried to do is, not become a content creator. I try to keep it. I try to keep it credible. I try to make sure that I don't do anything that is out of character for me. And so I think people know. It's just like the people that would hire me as an engineer are usually, musicians and bands, and they don't really know that much about my podcast, which is great. Yeah. It's all my engineering community and my audio community that knows about working class audio. And at the end of the day, they know. So, I don't worry too much about it. But sure, it's a factor. It's something that I've thought about before, for sure.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think honestly that we need more content creators, or whatever you want to call it, like you, who actually make real records all the time. Because that's the thing. Because a lot of educators or content creators out there have never made a real record in their life, which is a problem sometimes. And so I think we need more people doing what you do, but also actually still being engineers and producers. And I think this is relevant to our audience, because that's why I'm bringing it up also, is because I know a couple of people in our coaching program, for example, and Manel, you've been in that same situation too, where we talked about when someone is an artist and also a producer at the same time, then they sometimes struggle with how they want to present themselves. What do they put on their website? Do they have two? Do they have it on one? Or is it confusing to people? Do they want to be seen as the artist who also produces sometimes? Or do they want to be seen as a producer who also happens to make music? So I know that in our audience there are a couple people who are also not really sure about this, and they are afraid and insecure about how they want to present themselves to the world. But I think the reality is also that so many people in our world do more than one thing, and that's fine. And so, and I think that's, and one can help the other. So you talked about you being an artist too. Do you still make music these days? You're still in a band, or you make your own stuff?
No, I haven't been in a band in many, many years. And as far as me being a writer or any kind of artist, there are days where I'll sit down and I'll open Logic and I'll goof around and create something just out of pure entertainment. But I get more of a thrill helping other people get their projects completed. There's something about that draws me in more than working on my own thing, because I think I know what it takes to be an artist, and I have no intention of trying to dedicate the time that is needed to do that. You know, I make sure as I get older and as I grow as an audio professional, I try to understand what's a hobby and what's not a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, goofing around and making songs, that's fun. That's a hobby. Taking photographs, that's a hobby. Am I a professional in those areas? Absolutely not. But I most certainly know how to make a record from beginning to end, front to back, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this is the right time for me to ask the first philosophical question. so, like Matt, then why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do? Because it's something that I would do for free if I didn't have to make any money at it. It's something that draws me in. There's something about when somebody says, "Hey, we've got some music that we recorded. Can you help us mix it? Can you help us finish it?" I can't help but say yes, because to me it's a new opportunity to do something artistic and do something that satisfies me mentally, satisfies both sides of my brain. But I think inherently I have a desire to help people. So I think it satisfies that desire as well.
So I'd say it probably makes sense because you are like sharing things with other people, right? If you were to do it all by yourself, it wouldn't be as meaningful. Because I've been, I'm kind of philosophical today, but I've been thinking about these days. I've been thinking about, that I think that at the end, what I do and what we do as musicians, mixers, producers, whatever, at the end, it's all based on sharing with others in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I do a mix and I give all the assets to the artist, and they upload things and set up a release for their single or their record, and then they tell everybody about it. I tell everybody about it. I love sharing. Hey, I'm part of this. I worked on this with this cool person, and I want you to know about it as well. So yes, I would agree on the sharing aspect.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for that. That's true. And if we only make our own music, especially if we never release it, we don't get to share that. And so many people do that, and they just have piles of songs on their hard drives. Nobody ever hears them, and they don't work with others as well. So yeah.
Yeah.
Matt, for how long have you been producing, recording, engineering, all of that?
Let's see. I produced the first record I ever produced, not being a drummer, just, being an engineer, producer, in 1994.
Right.
I was still playing in bands, and a band in San Francisco approached me and said, they were friends, and they said, "Hey, you know how this works. Can you help us produce a record?" It's like, yeah, sure. I could do that. I know how that works. Cool. And once I did that, that was a critical moment for me when the record came out, and they were selling it. This was in the days of CDs, so they were still selling, CDs in record stores, and college radio would play new up and coming bands, and so KUSF in San Francisco was playing the record. The record was in stores, and that was just, I don't know why that impacted me so intensely as compared to my own records from my own bands being in stores or radio or whatever. That was a moment where I was like, I might have a problem here. I think I might have to switch careers, because this is way too fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. That's an exciting story. And I mainly asked the how long question because I want to repeat something you said earlier that I think is remarkable. You said, as I grow as an engineer, and you've been doing this for 30 years and you still talk about how you grow as an engineer and you get better and you evolve or whatever. And I think people just need to hear that because, sometimes people might think that if somebody's doing it for a while professionally, you kind of arrive and you're just good at what you do and you're kind of coasting. But I think like everyone I've ever talked to who has been doing this passionately for decades, they still grow and learn every day. And they still tell me that when they listen to a record that they've done last year or 2 years ago, they would maybe do things differently now because now they're better and it never stops. And so that is interesting that you say that. So, but I'm also not surprised. I mean, you surround yourself with people that you can learn from all the time with your show and all the people you know. So I'm not really surprised you're still growing, but I think it's worth pointing out there.
Yeah.
So you feel like that every day probably still?
I think that's important. Excuse me. I think I've said it before on my own show. If you come to a point where you think there's nothing left to learn, I don't know, that I lose interest in that.
Yeah.
In that concept. I feel like every day I meet old people, young people, people my age, and they're all doing interesting things. And I think that, I've been taking some classes at a community college, and there's some young people in there that are doing things that when I heard what they were doing, I just had to stop and ask a bazillion questions. Like, how are you getting those sounds? How does this work? What are you doing? This is insane.
Mm-hmm.
And they explained it to me, and I was just, this one guy in particular just blew me out of the water with what he was doing. And I had to dig in deeper. And so that's what keeps life exciting for me, is the continual learning and growing and, not accepting that, okay, we're done. I can't accept that.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. I hope people hear that. And I think they do. Yeah. So talking about things evolving and changing, how do you personally feel about the whole self-recording thing? Just because, and I really want the honest answer because my own beliefs around that have changed a little bit over the years too. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Do you ever work with self-recording bands at all? And is that a thing that can work in your opinion? And if so, maybe there are certain things that come to mind. I just love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. The short answer is I don't have a problem with it, and I deal with it all the time. And here's why I think it's a good thing. In the era that I was playing drums in bands, it was in the days before the internet, before cell phones. CDs were still being sold, and the process was kind of not, I don't want to call it cookie cutter, but the process was kind of set. It was, you got a record deal, you hired a producer, that producer did pre-production with the band. We would sit in a rehearsal place for 3 to 4 weeks, continually going through all the songs, tearing them apart, rebuilding them, changing the key, changing the tempo, changing the arrangement, trying different chord inversions, trying different ways of, singing it, of playing it. And then you went into the studio and you had a game plan for what you were going to do in the studio. These days, with the democratization of recording to everybody, that pre-production process is lost a little bit. So I think what's important is the ability for the musician to record themselves for the sole reason that they get to hear themselves back and understand, like as a band, 2 guitars, bass, and drums band, for example. If they record themselves and they play that back, they're immediately going to hear the problems. They're going to hear, wait a minute, I'm playing eighth notes and you're playing a quarter note, whatever it is. There's rhythmical inconsistencies, and then they start to talk, and then they start to improve. They start to realize, okay, drummer, I see what you're doing now because I'm the guitar player and I've been so wrapped up in my own thing that I haven't been paying attention. They hear each other and then they improve and change. So they do their own form of pre-production when they record themselves. So as far as how I feel about it, I think it's perfectly great because everybody should be recording. All musicians should know, have a general knowledge of recording so that they understand it, so that it's not a big mystery, and they can communicate better with engineers and producers.
Oh, I love that answer. Awesome. It leads me to the next thing I have here on my list of questions that I thought about. On your website, it says you called yourself like an old school guy on your website. So these are not my words. I found that on your page. But you were specifically talking about the approach of doing pre-pro, like you just talked about, and that when you produce with people, you like, ideally, if they let you, you'd like to start right at the beginning and help them choose the right songs, like which songs will go on the record, and then help them figure out all these things that you just mentioned during pre-production, which is a thing that is kind of lost these days. I agree. So can you talk a bit about the value of doing that, of being like, even if you do it yourself, or it doesn't really matter how you do it, but just that process of making sure that the songs are actually ready to be recorded, and that you, the players and the band and everybody's prepared, and that whole pre-production step that so many people just skip now, because so many people they write a song and immediately go to track it and skip that entire process. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too, and how you work when you produce a full record with a band, or even just a single. I don't know.
Yeah, well, when you skip that process and you go right to recording, you generally end up discovering the problems when it's costing you the most money.
Yeah.
And then that raises the tension level in the recording session, and it brings into question the decision-making process. Who's in charge? Like, who made this decision to just show up at the studio and discover, oh, that's what you're playing? That just seems so strange to me. You would never show up to build a house without a set of plans, without some sense of, are we building a single-story house or a two-story house? Is there a basement? How many bedrooms or bathrooms are there? It's the same with songs. You might think you have it in your brain like, well, this is how it goes. But when everybody hears their parts for the first time playing back, it can be a shock. And
yeah.
Then they realize, wait a minute, I've been playing a half step off of what you're doing, and nobody's recognized that until now. That's a problem. So, yeah, I like to try to, at least, if I'm producing, I like to have, some voice, some, be the adult in the room to say, assuming that this is going to be a commercial project, we want people to enjoy this, right? So why don't we make decisions that benefit the genre, that complement the genre, and help it become more widely accepted? And not, if it's a avant-garde art project, that's a different story.
Yeah.
If the commercial intentions are not there, that's a different story altogether. But if you are a pop rock band of any type, hip hop, rock, whatever it is, then you need to think on those terms of who is my audience, and therefore we need to make some smarter decisions in the studio so that people care, people want to listen to it.
Yeah.
Matt, I have a question here.
Yeah.
How do you handle situations with artists when they are doing something that is clearly detrimental for their music in your eyes, but they don't see it?
That's a tough one. I've been down that road a bazillion times.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's their record. But I like to bring to their attention, I'll say, I hear a potential problem here that distracts me as a listener. I always frame it, I always frame it in those terms. I always say, as a listener, as a fan, the fact that you want to bury the vocals so I don't understand what you're saying is a problem. I'm not enjoying this because I'm wanting to hear what it is you're saying. Or, hey, drummer, I know that you saw something on a drum video on YouTube that you want to try out, but it's not working in this song very well, and it's a complete distraction to, your 64 note hi-hat blast beat in the middle of this jazz song is really a problem.
I love that you pick drummers on this one.
Yeah, well, I'm a drummer, so I'll pick on them all day long. They're a unique breed of human being.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough situation that we all run into from time to time, right? And Manel, just for context, what you do, Manel, is, and I think that's an exciting thing to see. I've seen some pretty impressive transformations there. So Manel is sometimes taking very rough ideas, like phone demos or somebody just singing a melody or capturing a quick idea, and basically then turns those into full productions with the artist. So Manel will play all the instruments, will arrange it all with them, will help them turn their idea into a song. And of course, if you go through that kind of process, there's all kinds of pure taste things, right? So I bet it's kind of, I can only imagine it can be hard to get on the same page with the artist, and a lot of communication is involved, I guess. Right? It's like,
is that for Manel?
That's for Manel more than anything.
Yeah. It can be hard, but I mean, I've been in some situations, and you know about this, Benedict, where, I knew there was this problem, but, as you said, it can be subjective, right? But you ask your peers, your people you trust, and all of them think the same that you think. So, and you tell the artist, but yeah, there's no way to change it for now.
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, but I think I like the framing, Matt, that you brought up there, from just not talking, from like this, I'm the expert producer, I tell you what to do kind of perspectives, but just like, I'm a music fan too, and I listen to this, and this is how I feel about it as a music fan. I think that can help. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if they feel super passionate about it, I'll let it go. I'll just say, if this is what you want to do, I'll back you. But here's here's why I am objecting to your decision in the first place, because it's difficult for me to consume this or to listen or to feel this. And maybe it's an acquired taste and I haven't acquired it yet.
Yeah, that's such a, oh man, I love this. It can be that we're just wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So totally an option. Yeah. Cool. Matt, you're talking to us from your studio right now, right? The Atmos room that you've built.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well a little bit. Atmos is obviously something that I've heard a lot about, and I've been into Atmos rooms and all that, but I personally don't have an Atmos setup. I just played around with it on headphones. And I'm interested in this topic mainly because first of all, I've asked our audience about it a couple of times, and although we have a decent-sized audience, nobody really seems to be interested in that topic at all. And it's like, there's a couple of reasons for that, I guess, but it's not something we've covered a lot just because people don't respond to it and don't have questions about it, don't really even know what it is sometimes, although it's been around for a while now. And the other thing is that in my mixing studio, to this day, I never had a single request for an Atmos mix. And I thought in the beginning, when everybody was talking about, I thought like, hey, well, I probably should learn this, and this is going to be a thing, And then I tried, like I said, on headphones, but I never really got deep into it, let alone built a studio, an Atmos studio, just because there's no demand for me in that world that I'm in. And so I'd love to hear your perspective, because the type of music you make is not too far away from what I do. It's very, very similar.
Oh, yeah.
But you have obviously a lot of demand for that, or enough for you to build a studio. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that. And then I saw and I had no idea about this, I saw on your credits list the Deaf Heaven record that you did an Atmos mix for, Sunbather, which I absolutely love that record. I had no idea you did the Atmos mix. So that also got me excited and curious about it. So what made you take that leap and jump into Atmos, and where does the demand come from, and all that? Like, just curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, I want to give Atmos a little bit of backstory to understand it. So in film, where I don't have any involvement whatsoever. In film, there was all these formats, 5.1, 7.1, and all these movie theaters were coming up with these surround sound formats. And to me, surround sound at this point sounds like an outdated term, which I think it is. And I'll get to what it's morphed into. But the problem is that as a filmmaker, if you did you did your film and then you did a 5.1 mix of it, there would be challenges to having it play back in a theater that was a 7.1 or a 22.1 or whatever surround technology the certain theaters were capable of. So Dolby said, what if we come up with a format that is scalable, that will work in theaters in almost any format to allow us to place, we could still have channels, we could still have 5.1 and 7.1, but we can also have objects. We can have elements that move in an XYZ coordinate system. They can stay still or they can move. And so they came up with Atmos. And I think the animated movie Brave was, I think, the first movie to have it. Fast forward, I'm going to say 10 years, and it starts to make its way into the music world. And I had heard about it, and my friend Steve Genowick at the time was working at Capitol, and he talked about it, oh yeah, this Atmos thing. And I was friends with the guys at PMC Speakers in the US, and they would always have a booth at NAMM. And I thought it was cool, but I was like, there's no commercial outlet for any of this. So I just did not pay attention, just as I had not paid attention to 5.1, 7.1. So I ignored it. But then I started to see friends set up Atmos studios. Andrew Sheps, I was like, Andrew's setting up an Atmos studio. My friend Brad Wood is setting up an Atmos studio. What is going on? Because Andrew's over in the UK and Brad's over in Los Angeles. Something's going on. What is happening? And then Apple made their announcement, and I was like, something huge is about to take place here. I had no demand, but I said, okay, I'm going to get into this. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get in, because if Apple is getting in, that is the biggest indicator of what is possible. So I called my friends at PMC. We figured out a system. I called my friends at Grace. We figured out what speaker controller I was going to use. I flew down to Los Angeles. I stayed with Steve Genowick for a weekend and had my own one-on-one, mixed with the masters kind of moment with him. Where he walked me through it step by step. We went to Dave Way's studio. We went over to PMC's demo room, and I just got a crash course in Atmos from those guys. So I came home, I ordered all the stuff, I sold off a bunch of stuff to pay for it, and I set it up, and I made a few phone calls, and next thing I know, Dolby is at my door, and they are here to tune the room. And I then spent the next 6 months experimenting and learning and understanding and mixing and sending mixes to other Atmos engineers and saying, what do you think? Nah, this is terrible. You're doing it wrong. Here's, keep this in mind. So I want to be really clear that there was no demand for me to do this. It was purely like, I see an opportunity, just like I saw an opportunity in 1997. There was a moment where I was like, I need to have my own recording rig. Do I buy a Mackie board and a bunch of ADATs, or do I look at this new thing, Pro Tools, on the computer and get that? And I was like, I think this computer Pro Tools thing is going to go somewhere. I'm going to go with that. That's the same decision-making process involved with Atmos. I was like, okay, I'm going to get in now. And I've now been in, I think this is my 5th year in it. And a few opportunities came my way. We have a show here in the United States called Real Time with Bill Maher It's on HBO, and the theme song is performed by Green Day. And HBO is said, hey, we're going to start broadcasting live in Atmos. We need this Green Day song remixed in Atmos. And my friend Chris Dugan, who's been on the show, been on Working Class Audio a couple times, Chris called me and he goes, hey, I got this thing. How does this whole Atmos thing work? And so I said, come on over. Let's figure it out. Let's mix, I mixed the Green Day thing. Chris came over and approved and made a couple tweaks. And we pushed all the material out for Green Day. And then he said, okay, I got this Alanis Morissette thing. She does this soundtrack or these songs for this show called Yellow Jackets. It's on Showtime. Can you do that? I could do that, sure. And then Jack Shirley, who produced Sunbather for Deaf Heaven, called me up. How does this Atmos thing work, Matt? Can you do this? All right, great. Met with Jack. He's doing fresh remixes for Deaf Heaven. He hands me all the multi-tracks and says, okay, go do it. Make it sound good. And I'll come over and I'll approve it or I won't. And he comes over and and actually just a side tangent on that. Jack came over and he heard the mixes and he goes, okay. This sounds good, but you've got me in the middle of the band. I want you to change the perspective and put the band up here. And I want to be back here and have it wash over me. And that was a mix revision that I had never in my life received. So I was like, okay. Changed everything. Jack showed up, gave me the approval. Was like, yeah, go for it. This is great. So since then, I haven't had as many high-profile projects. I have not cashed in on doing remixes for a bunch of legacy artists. And in some ways, I'm glad I didn't get that opportunity because it's a huge pain in the ass and everybody gets kind of crazy in that world. But what I have done is in mixing Green Day, as we were setting things up and delivering things, we were, I was told we need the Atmos mix, but we also need a stereo mix as a reference. So as we were going through that and giving them what they wanted, I realized, oh my gosh, we could do this all in one pass. We do not have to do mix in stereo, create stems, mix in Atmos. That's just too long and involved. Why can't we just do this all at once and make one mix in Atmos and at the same time deliver a stereo mix? And so I figured that out. So now when I mix for any indie artist, I just charge a little bit more than I normally would for a stereo mix, and they get both. And that way they can take advantage of the economic opportunities that do exist and that will continue to materialize as the future in Atmos continues to move forward. So
awesome. Thank you for that. That's exactly what I wanted to hear in terms of the backstory with that. My thoughts, and I'm not at all an expert on this, but like my experience when I listen to Atmos mixes, because I've listened to a ton of them because I wanted to understand just what it is all about, what people like about it, what they don't like about it, understand all these different opinions. And my personal opinion was always that very rarely have I heard an Atmos mix of an already existing stereo production that sounded really exciting to me, or more exciting than the original stereo mix. But I've heard a couple of really exciting Atmos things that were specifically made for Atmos. And so one of the things I'm always wondering is, and you talked about the approach of doing both at the same time, but I wonder if we can even go one step further back and be like, would it make sense for people to produce with Atmos in mind, like make things that work on that format rather than think in like stereo and then hire someone to figure out the Atmos version for it? Because I always had a feeling that those specifically made for Atmos things, they can be really, really impressive and exciting sounding. And I not always had that same kind of experience with some of the legacy artists that I was like, give me the original. It's like I don't need this. It just sounds like some of these sound like someone like you would play it back in kind of a club or a room or something, like a weird ambience around it, but it's not really doing anything for me. I might be totally off with this, but this was my personal kind of experience listening to this, and I would love to hear your thoughts if artists should or can think about Atmos like from the start when they plan a project, when they write their songs and they arrange things.
First of all, I don't think you're off. If you've heard something you don't like, you either like it or you don't. And I think the challenge that Atmos has encountered right from the get-go is that, you're asking people to listen to something, like take a loved band or song, and you're asking them to hear it in a foreign environment.
Yeah.
and everything's changed. And the other challenge that Atmos has faced is that, and if you go back before Atmos and you go back to the 5.1, 7.1 surround sound days, in the days where they were making Blu-rays and SACDs that were like, and I always use this as an example because I have friends who have this, like Flaming Lips, the band, would do a special edition 5.1 surround sound SACD or Blu-ray, and they would put that out, and that would be a thing on its own, and it would exist on its own, and the stereo would exist on its own. The problem that we have today is that the streaming services are trying to feed us Atmos and stereo, and it depends on the device you have, the equipment you have. I've had mixes come up that I'm like, wait, what's going on right now? Why does this sound so different? And then I would look down and go, and actually this is more of a comment about Sony 360. I would see, like, I'd be on Amazon on a playlist that I created, and all of a sudden I'm listening to Cheap Trick, and I'm like, why does this sound like crap? And I'm like, oh, it's in Sony 360, and I'm already on the airplane, and I can't change it back to stereo. So that was an issue. But people in Sony 360, to me, is I have yet to hear a mix in Sony 360 that I like. Now, that said, in Dolby Atmos, there is also a ton of terrible mixes that were done because people at labels wanted to do things cheaply. So they got a hold of the multi-tracks and threw those to some inexperienced person. I don't know who they were, engineers or interns or whatever. And they got on headphones and sat in a cubicle in the office and remixed a classic track or album that I have loved and ruined it.
Yeah.
Now, are there good Atmos mixes? Yes, there's some amazing Atmos mixes out there. But the fact that these Atmos mixes and these stereo mixes are coexisting in the same streaming platforms where you can switch between the two, this concept of beating the stereo mix is just, I think it's a problem. So fortunately, and I can't speak about it in detail because I don't think I'm supposed to yet, but there is a platform that is coming out in July in 2025 from some German friends that will be a lossless Atmos streaming service.
Oh, that's exciting.
Where I don't believe there is a stereo aspect to it, which I think is going to be great. Now, to answer your question, should artists be planning their productions in Atmos? Absolutely. When I record now, every time I record, there's extra mics. I put them in specific spaces because I know that when I mix it, I know where those mics are going to go. They're going to go in the rear speakers or the top speakers or the side speakers. It's going to complement the whole mix. And it's going to make the stereo mix even cooler too. So,
yeah, totally. That's what I thought you'd say. And I always wondered why there are not like just different categories, at least on streaming platforms. Like, give me an Atmos, just so I can choose when I'm on a platform if I just want to listen to Atmos mixes or stereo music, but not like blend them all together in a way. That was always kind of weird to me. And the other thing that was weird to me, and I don't know if that's been a problem for you, you said that the Apple thing was a big reason for you to jump into this. I don't know, but like as far as I understand, and also from what I'm hearing, the Apple Spatial is not really Atmos, so that creates a whole other set of problems as well, which is pretty frustrating if you're trying to, if you work on Atmos mixes, but then Apple does their own thing, and it seems that there's in general this lack of like one uniform way of doing it that would just work everywhere. It's just not the case. So this is probably another frustrating thing too, is that the different devices, the platforms and all that, and especially the Apple thing.
Yeah, and I want to be clear about what the Apple thing is. When you make a mix and you you make your mix and you get it right in speakers first, but then there's some extra information that you can control in the headphones. That's the ability to make instruments or whatever it is you have in your mix. You can make it appear like it's this close, or this close. It's off, near, mid, or far.
Yeah.
And you can control that. It's what's called the metadata. You can say, hey, I want those guitars to sound like they're, 10 feet away from here, if you want, for example. And Amazon and Tidal respect that. They take that. When you hear a mix on Amazon or Tidal, you are hearing what the mixer intended for the most part, even though you're hearing a lossy version of it, you are hearing that metadata in action. When Apple takes it, they do something, I don't know what they do with it. I've heard that they throw that metadata out and they try to recreate it in their own image.
Yeah,
I don't know why. And I've talked about it so much now on my own show and other people's shows that I think that if I disappear tomorrow, it's because Apple had me taken out, or they're going to, can anything I have to do with on their platform. I want to be clear. Apple has been a great ally in the world of Atmos, but they made some missteps that if Steve Jobs were alive would never have let go by.
Yeah.
There's things that are happening on the Apple platform that make my job harder, that make every Atmos mixer's job harder, because you do a mix, you get the artist to sign off on it, and then they hear it on Apple Music and they're like, what the hell happened? What is going on? Excuse me. So there's work to be done there. And I also want to say this. Atmos is, in the world of music, is not that old. It's relatively young. And at this point, I'm going to just cross my fingers and hope that Apple does the right thing and that the whole platform of Atmos continues to mature and grow as time goes along.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the explanation as well. I think that makes it a lot clearer for the audience too. Now, one final thing on Atmos, just for our self-recording audience. I've heard the argument a couple of times where people said, well, the majority of people will listen to Atmos mixes or spatial mixes, whatever, on headphones anyways, because most people will not install an Atmos setup at home or something. And yes, there are cars that can do it, and will be more and more probably too in the future. But people have said, since most people will listen to it on headphones anyways, wouldn't it make sense that most Atmos mixers work on headphones too and create the mixes right there on the format or on the device that people will also use to play it back? So first of all, I want to hear your thoughts on that. And then the next question would be, DIY artists doing their own stuff or working in a home studio who cannot install a proper Atmos setup, can they achieve great results on headphones? Is this something we should even try? Is it something where you don't even try? If you're going to do it properly? What are your thoughts on that whole thing?
Yeah, I've had a few very experienced engineering friends say, I'm not going to buy all those speakers. I'm just going to do it on headphones. And they do it on headphones, and then they go check it on speakers at a friend's place, and they're horrified at the results, because you tend to take things to the extreme in headphones to make a difference. And so the short answer is, if you can do it, you can skimp, you can buy cheap speakers, there's ways you can start on speakers and not spend a crazy amount of money, and start on speakers and then check it on headphones. As far as everybody's going to hear it on headphones, that may be the case right now, but I don't plan for the short term on anything. I plan for the long term. So I make a mix that I know is going to hold up on speakers and headphones, because if the trend changes, which I hope it will, all those people that said, oh, I'm just going to mix it on headphones, their mixes are going to sound terrible when everybody decides, oh, actually, I do like listening on speakers. And here's where that materializes. Sonos is probably the leading company, and possibly JBL as well, on making Atmos equipped single boxes. The
I have one of
Sonos
those at
Era
home.
300 is a great example. All their sound bars and all that are great examples. Here in America, we have a store called Costco. It's like a football field worth of consumer goods. They sell JBL Atmos equipped boom boxes. And then to top all that off, Dolby has a technology called Flex Connect, where your television in your living room says, "Hey, it looks like you've got 2 or 3 other wireless speakers in your house. Why don't you connect those to the system, and I'll give you Atmos." It doesn't matter where they're located. I've seen it in action. It's just like, here's a television and one wireless speaker, and it changes everything about what you're hearing in that room. So sure, you can make short-term decisions about what is happening right at this moment, but we all know things are changing every day at rapid speed. Whether it's the news and what we focus on, or the technology that we have in front of us, things are shifting. So if you plan for today, you're probably going to screw yourself in the end. So plan for the future, do it right, do it the best you can, get some help, and don't think you can do everything on the cheap all the time. I would love to do my own plumbing, but at the end of the day, I know that if I do it wrong, I'm gonna suffer for it. So I hire a plumber.
Yeah, great analogy. Love that. Yeah, but I also want to say to the audience, it doesn't mean that you are screwed now if you cannot work in Atmos. Like, stereo will not go away anytime soon as well. Like, keep making great songs and mixes and records in stereo, and keep enjoying that. It's not about panicking. But like, yeah, if Atmos is at all interesting to you, or if you enjoy that as a listener, might be worth planning ahead for that. Yeah. Okay, cool. So from Atmos to, I don't know, Manel, we've been talking for a while. Do you have any more philosophical questions before I get to Matt with another one?
Well, yeah, I have one more philosophical question. I think it's been partially answered before, but I think I'd like to hear a more like clear answer.
Okay.
And first fun fact is that I'm 30 years old. So when you did your first mix without being a drummer, I was born, which is funny.
I'm getting older as we're talking.
But the question is, how do you keep things fresh after such a long time? Like after 30 years, how do you survive in this, industry for 30 years?
How do you survive? You keep your expenses low. That's the first answer. The second is, and you're right, I did kind of answer it earlier. To keep things fresh, you have to always remember, like I said before, is that there's always something new to learn, whether it's Atmos or seeing what some 20-year-old is doing in the world of, heavy rock, guitar, amp simulator technology, or, like just being aware that I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I have experience and I have enough wisdom to know that I'm not the smartest guy in the room, that there's great stuff happening all around me. So to keep things fresh, I just try to listen to what other people are saying, what they're doing, and not being scared of technology, not being scared of AI, not being scared of Atmos, not being scared. We have all these tools constantly evolving in front of us. And I'm always interested to see, like, well, what does this do? What does this sound like? Ooh, I like that. Oh, I don't like that. So I'll try this. And, you just have to, like, when I wake up in the morning, A, at my age, I'm thankful that I'm still here. And B, I just think, what's possible today? What can I do today? What's out there? What's left to explore? You just have to have the mindset of somebody who has an appreciation for living and for sharing and for participating in, let's face it, the world of music, it's not politics. I mean, it can be political, but it's fun. It's art. It's subjective. To me, there are no rules. People have set precedents before, but at the end of the day, I love it when people break the rules and do stuff weird and change the game. And that's how you keep things fresh. So while I don't wake up in the morning thinking, how can I change the game? I'm not that, my ego's not that big. I'm just a kid, really, at the end of the day. I'm just still fascinated. I have a childlike fascination with things around me, and I will continue to do so. And I think that that's what, in spite of the gray, keeps me young.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for that. I love that. Again, it's, fascinating to hear how positive your whole attitude also is on all these things, like, and the whole not be scared of new things. I love that too. So that is actually something I wanted to talk about to you about as well. That your like rants at the beginning of your episodes, I've always loved them because they are not necessarily about audio. They are about mental health, about taking care of yourself, having your shit together outside of the studio, or like outside of audio even sometimes. And it's like, just, I don't know how you come up with these topics, but they always really resonate with me. They're always interesting. And I love that you also take the time to talk about those things, especially at the beginning of an episode, when we all know that, if you do that, you risk people not getting to the actual episode because they don't want to hear whatever you're talking about in the beginning, and everyone's worried about the perfect hook so that people stay engaged and whatever. And you just talk about these things at the top of the episode, which I love. And and then you also, I think you are sponsoring that. I don't know if you're doing that still, but you're sponsoring that forum over at Gearspace. I forgot what it's called, but it's also on these topics. So I don't know. What made you do this, and where do you get your positive attitude and like, you seem to be someone who's working on yourself as a person all the time too, not just in the audio space. So what was there some event that caused this? Have you always been like that? And what made you want to do this even on your show?
Wow. I can't say that there was an event. We've been talking a lot about growth and learning, and I listen to a lot of national public radio here in the United States, and I hear things on their shows sometimes that I'm like, oh, that's interesting how they do this part, and then they go to this part, like just analyzing what they're doing on talk radio or national public radio in particular, and the idea may have come from that, not necessarily the rant, but I think it may have started. I had some idea that I just wanted to get across, and I thought, oh, I'll just do these rants, because if you go back to the earlier versions of the show, the rants did not exist.
Yeah.
It was just me just kind of blah, 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 blah. And to me, if I go back to those early episodes, I just cringe because I just sound like such an inexperienced little kid. And now I'll wake up, or I'll have a dream, or I'll be standing in the shower and it'll hit me like, wow, this is really bothering me right now, or this topic is important to me. And then I think, oh, that could be a good rant. Maybe I should talk about that. Mm-hmm. None of it's written down ever. I sit down at the mic. Sometimes it takes me 5 tries to even get it, because I'll be like talking on the mic and I'll lose my train of thought. And I'm like, that sounds terrible. So then I'll stop and I'll start again and I'll refine my thoughts. And I just do it off, there's, like I say, there's no script. I just talk. And I talk from the heart, and I just tell people, like, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm focused on. Here's what you said you might think about. I really try not to tell people what to do unless I really feel like they need to be told what to do. Like, when I say, don't do, if I'm saying like, don't do stupid shit, I'll say something, like that. But I don't know. The rant is a chance for me to just kind of talk off the cuff about something that I think is important, that is important to me at the moment. And it's funny to hear you say that you like it, and I've heard other people say they like it. When I first started it, I was like, people are going to jump past this. They are not going to listen to this.
Yeah.
And I get so many like messages like, hey, I love your rant today.
Yeah.
That hit home for me because, and I'm like, who would have thought?
Yeah.
I just go with it. And yes, I'm always trying to improve myself all the time. You know, I wake up every morning and I just think, oh man, I got to quit doing that one thing. I got to do it this way. Let me try this and see what the ramifications are. So yeah, it's just me being myself.
Awesome. Yeah. I love the whole thing that you said about not telling people how to do or what to do, how to do a certain thing. I've actually switched in the way, like the content that we make. I try to switch from, even in tutorials, I try to switch away from how to do XYZ, because there's rarely this one way of doing anything. I try to switch from that to, here's how I do XYZ. And then if you like that approach, you can try it and see if it works for you. And if not, then not. But like, I like to share my perspective and how I do things, but I don't want to pretend it's the one way to do it. Like that's, and I try to really avoid that, even in titles and stuff like that. I don't want to do much how-to content anymore, honestly.
Oh my God. You're striking a chord with me there, because like, even just on if I'm on social media, you know, if you're cooking eggs this way, you're doing it wrong. If you're, you know, if you're washing your dishes with this soap, you're doing it wrong. It's like, I hate that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's like, no, I'm doing it the way I do it. And it's the same thing with audio content. I cannot stand watching YouTube videos from any of these people that's, you know, where they're like, you know, if you're mixing drums like this, you're doing it wrong. It's like,
yeah,
no, I'm not. This is subjective. I'm doing it the way I do it. So shut the hell up. Now, that's very different from back to, you know, like talking about Andrew Sheps, for example. If Andrew's on PureMix saying, hey, here's my thing, here's my template, this is how I do it. He never says, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And I love that. That's and when you have content like that from people like that, that's fantastic. But when I get these people who look like they're 12 years old and they, you know, had a YouTube channel at one point where they were a life coach.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I'm at my age, I'm looking at that, I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. So I'm going to take mixing advice from this person. I don't think so. I'll scroll right past that. I am not the audience for that. And also, you know, I appreciate you saying, you know, I'm very positive. I have the ability to be very negative and be a dick, just like any other human. I am not. Don't give me sainthood yet here. I have my days of being an asshole for sure.
I believe it. Yeah. I'm just sharing my experience, and every time I've talked to you, which was at NAMM and then on the podcast, it was very nice. And I heard you so many times on the podcast, and that's, you know, all the experience I have, and that was always positive. So
just thank your lucky stars. Neither one of you live with me. You'd be like, oh my God, this guy, I can't take this guy anymore.
We're all just humans, right? So I mean, yeah. All right. Yeah, that's great. So. From one final thing that I wanted to get to is, you've talked to so many great engineers and producers and all of that on your podcast, of course. Andrew Sheps being a great example that you brought up before, who's also very nice, by the way. When I would talk to him at NAMM, like, very, very nice person. Anyway, you brought up those people, I brought it up. You talked to all those people. I wonder, after all these years of doing this, and not only on the podcast, you know a lot of people and talk to other people just to learn and grow yourself as well. Are there like common threads or like commonalities between all those people where you're like, yeah, this thing pretty much every single time I ask this question or we get to this topic, everybody pretty much agrees on this? Or are there like, some things where it's the data just shows that it's probably true or valuable or anything like that? Have you ever analyzed that, or have you ever looked at like what all those interesting and fascinating and great people have in common in the world of audio?
I'm too lazy to do any analysis of it, but I can tell you that the thing that probably after 10 years of doing this that I'm starting to notice. There's a persistence in a lot of people I interview, and that persistence started years ago. It's the person who, and I've talked about this probably on my show and other people's shows, where it's those interviews where you hear them say, yeah, I knocked on every door and then one person answered the door and I got an internship at this studio, or I got fired from here and I went across the street to this studio. It's the people that really refuse to stop.
Mm-hmm.
They have such a persistence and a tenacity to them that it's inspiring. Like they're so focused on what it is that they want to do that they don't stop. And I think that's the key. You're going to run into, as audio professionals, we run into daily challenges. There's days where I'm thinking, should I stop? And then I think, you kind of really can't stop. You really love this too much. So you better figure it out. You better figure out how to keep yourself above the water and survive. So I think that, yeah, it's the willingness to not stop. It's the refusal to stop. It's the refusal to give in.
Mm-hmm.
So that, coupled with my mentality of trying to improve, I think allows one to stay involved. And quite honestly, a lot of those people that keep going, they also have, husbands and wives and partners and allies that go along on the journey with them and help take the edge off and support them. I brought this up recently. It's like, I don't know if I would have been able to stay in as long as I have had it not been for my wife and her working a corporate job. I mean, and I think that is something that goes greatly unacknowledged for a lot of people that you think are like crazy successful because they're just so brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think that's the case at all. I think in many cases, if you see an audio professional who's lasted, they're either in the 1%, like the Chris Lord-Alges of the world, and that's great. But if they're not, they have a partner along the way who's helped pay the bills and keep things moving in the background when they were out doing their thing and having those moments of not making any money.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult business to be in, and it unfortunately it takes a level of entrepreneurship these days to make it work. I'm sure you guys know. I mean, you've got your thing, but you also engineer, and it complements. Those things complement one another, just like working class audio complements my audio career. That's 100%. Why I preach diversification so much, because I want to see audio professionals survive. So you have to be. You can't just say, I'm going to sit down and do this one task every day, all day, 40 hours a week, or however many hours we're working, and expect it to always work all the time. Maybe there's a couple examples in the world, but I think my approach has worked for me, and I bet it's working for other people.
Yeah, I agree. I know I said on your show that it worked for me with the specialization, and it really did. But also after a pretty long time of doing everything, which I also mentioned on the show, that came through the door. Like I said yes to everything. I did live sound so much. There are a couple of things I actually forgot to even mention when you asked me those questions. But like, I did live sound. I did all kinds of things. And then at some point, it just happened that I've always said, like, I got to specialize in mixing mixing certain things. It just kind of happened. But even now, I started doing other things because I don't want to do just one thing. So I started doing the podcast and the coaching and all these other things that I'm doing. But I think especially at the beginning, it is great to do a lot of different things, say yes to many things, and then some people specialize, others not. But I agree about the diversification, especially in the beginning. And yeah, the fact that even very busy or very successful engineers and producers have months or weeks or whatever where the phone just doesn't ring is something that is often not talked about and people tend to forget. I heard, again, Andrew Shepp say on one episode, I don't know if it was yours, but I heard him say just a couple years ago that there's still a month or two sometimes where nothing really happens and he starts to worry, and then all of a sudden it picks up again, and that's just part of it. And I think almost every single one of those people has gone through at least one period where they were struggling a little bit or they had to rely on others to get them through this. I think this is, most of us have that in common for sure.
Yeah. And, Andrew talks about, I think, he worked on, he did an Adele record. And I think that, I can't remember the story exactly. I think he either won a Grammy for it or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And then the phone didn't ring for 3 months afterwards.
Can you imagine that? It's crazy.
No, no, I can't. And I love that Andrew's so forthcoming about it and real about it, because I think we really set people up for failure and do a disservice to them when we say, oh yeah, I worked on these bands and life is great and everything's always the best. It's no, it's not. It's not. It's very challenging. It's very difficult and it can be very stressful.
Yeah, totally agree. And in terms of audio things or skills or something that those people have in common, is there anything? Because one thing that I think I've observed, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, is that a lot of the pros, most of them that I've heard or that I've talked to, and my peers, people that I surround myself with, they all do their own thing and they try to do unique things and push boundaries and keep things fresh, like we said. But they also never skipped the basics, or they learned the basics of audio first in order to be able to then break all the rules intentionally, basically. Mm-hmm. So this is something that I find really interesting too. There's rarely someone who's really great who doesn't know about signal flow or, the boring things or gain structure, balancing, just getting a good rough mix with just faders and panning, or all these audio basics that seem to be trivial, boring, whatever. Most great people that I've ever talked to, they know all these things for sure. And then, of course, you can go and intentionally break things and do it differently. But there's almost never somebody who just skipped all these basics and jumped straight to the fancy stuff or did it their own way. And so it's interesting how the pros never don't do the basics, basically, right?
Yeah. And once again, bringing up Andrew, I've been at NAMM where I'm walking by a presentation he's doing and somebody's asking a question and I'm exaggerating here, but what's the best EQ to use on kick drum on a Wednesday at 4:00, kind of questions. And I'm all, and in my head as I'm walking by, I'm like, oh my God, these questions. And I hear Andrew say, yeah, I don't know. I whatever, the first one that I pull up that does the job, that's the thing. I think when you get to a point where you're not even thinking about any of this stuff, you're just okay, I got hired. I'm going to do this. What do we have? Okay, great. We've got this. All right, let me get it in shape. And all right, let me pull up a couple of my favorite plugins. I don't know many people who are so over analytical about the process that they really put any time into. And I'm not saying, once again, I don't know anybody. Yeah. Maybe there's some people out there that really think through this, but two examples of people that I know, Andrew Sheps and Chad Blake, two people I love and respect and who are friends. I know neither of those guys think, well, let me see, how many EQ plugins are we going to use here? And what's the math involved? And they don't do that. They just put stuff up and try it till it sounds right. And the trick is they know, like many of us, how to just get to it and get it done and get it out the door. And I think, we talk about 10,000 hours. I think it takes more than that, because I just now feel after 30 years, I'm getting to a point where I'm like, I'm moving faster and I'm just like, whatever, do I create a send and a return for the reverb? I don't give a shit. Let me just put the reverb on the track itself and adjust the wet. Like there's days where I stick to convention of what I've learned, and there's days where I'm like, what's the fastest way to get to the sound that I want to hear right this second?
Yeah,
the
but
idea
you don't
of
do
going
it.
back,
But you don't do it because you've never learned it properly. You do it intentionally, and you know how to do both. That's a big difference, right?
right?
You can do
right.
it intentionally in the right way. Still,
I make a split-second decision and say, I'm not going to gain anything by separating this reverb out right now. I just need to get this reverb on this so I can hear what it's going to do. And I think many of us don't even think about these things too much. We want the result. We don't really care how we get there.
No, we react to the music and just reach for things that will get us there. Yeah, totally. And to quote Andrew Sheps one more time, what matters is what comes out of the speakers, right? It's like
that's all that matters. And you know something? Take it one step further. That really the only thing that matters is how the song strikes somebody. Nobody cares what plugins you're using. They don't care. They don't know.
Mm.
Why would they care?
Yeah.
And that's not going to determine whether you get a Grammy. That's not going to determine anything. If it sounds good, it sounds good. And if it touches people, it touches people. All that other stuff doesn't matter.
Period. Nothing to add to that.
Period. I just, I mean, I love our audio community across the world, but there are just some people that put too much focus on the plugins that we're using and the plugin chains we're using, and use. In fact, I think I used a quote from you in when I was promoting your appearance on my podcast, where you talked about how people are using they're developing these plugin chains and then they're just putting them on things without any because they were told, oh, you need to have this plugin chain on a vocal. It's like, well, what does the vocal sound like on its own without all that stuff? Yeah, in fact, I got that's one of the recent influences of you to me, where I heard you say that and I was like, that's so true.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah. You said, when I said that, you responded saying, that way of mixing is so fascinating to me. Like when you're not listening, you said you had to listen, you identify a problem, and then you do something about it, but you don't just do things just because, or because somebody else did it or whatever. Right. But yeah.
And I'm not saying that I'm not influenced by other mixing engineers. Certainly not. But I don't go, oh, we're starting a mix. What would Michael Brower do? What would Chad do? What would Andrew do? I don't do that. I just, maybe I've been influenced. It's like a musician. Maybe you play a groove that you were influenced by Max Roach or Buddy Rich or Neil Peart or Simon Phillips, but you don't do that and think, oh, I'm doing my Simon Phillips thing. You just do you. You play your thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope people will do.
Totally. And that does, and still you can, once you've identified the problem and you know what you actually want, you can, of course, still go to all these things that you've learned from these other mixes. We learn somehow and we see something, we think it's exciting, we want to try it ourselves. That's totally fine. But have a reason to try it and do it, basically. That's the whole thing. And
I'll give you a perfect example. I went to mix with the Masters in 2017 with Chad Blake in France. Great experience. We were all sitting around behind Chad. There was big screens on either side of the mixing console. And Chad's in there mixing a song, and he would put a plugin up, and everybody would go and write down all the settings. And then he would take it down, and people would go, Chad, can you put that plugin back up? And he's like, guys, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's this particular situation. This has no effect on anything you're going to do. It's all contextual. You have to base it on the material you're dealing with. So this setting, it's so random.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Don't love that. Yeah, absolutely. It's about the why. Yeah. Man, thank you for sharing all of these exciting stories and insights. And there's so many cool things in this episode that our audience will appreciate for sure. Lots of nuggets, tons of stuff I've learned as well today again. So thank you for all of that. Manel, You want to end this in a philosophical way or something? I don't know.
Bring the philosophy, Manel.
Yeah.
I have no more philosophical,
No more philosophy
things
in
to
you.
say.
You're philosophically
I'm,
empty.
I'm happy I got to spend an hour with two experts, like super experts here.
I don't want to call myself an expert. I'm just a guy who's been doing it for, a long time and still trying to figure it out.
Oh yeah, and you definitely have figured some things out already, man. Yeah. So Matt, where can we where should we send people to if they want to check out your work, if they're interested in working with you as a mixer, producer, if they want to check out the podcast? Like, what's the best place to contact you?
I would say go to mattboudreau.com, mattboudreau.com. That's, if you want to work with me, that's the place to go. If you're interested in the podcast, obviously, go to workingclassaudio.com. You can find me on Instagram under both Matt Boudreau and Working Class Audio. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm a little out there.
Yeah.
A little too out there sometimes. Not philosophically, just like my presence is out there.
Yeah, we're going to put all those links in the show notes, of course, and in the YouTube description if you're watching this. And then you can check out Matt's work and talk to him if you're interested in working with him, and also check out the podcast. So thank you again for taking the time, Matt. This has been fantastic. Our audience will appreciate this for sure. I also think it's a unique and different perspective, and a very healthy one, and a very positive one. So I'm grateful for you doing it that way and doing it the way you do it. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that you guys even care enough to hear what I have to say.
No, we definitely do. All right. So take care, Matt. Thanks for your time.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Bye.